So last week for the 4th of July weekend, I stood up here and I wore black. Today I'm choosing to wear colors again. And for 6 years now, I've been in some form, I'm realizing this now, I realized this week, that I've been in some form of the grief cycle for my country. The grief cycle traditionally consists of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And I know that since about 2015, I have been in some form of denial, shock, amazement, foreboding. And last week it was a combination of rage and anger and fear. And then after the service last week, I just kind of moved into this new phase of acceptance. And I realized that the country I grew up in and imagined in my mind, and the country that I thought was there and that I grew up with, is gone. And I realized also that maybe it never truly existed in the first place. Maybe this last week I found myself ready to simply release the veil, so to speak, and was finally able to acknowledge that this country, that I was able to acknowledge this country for what it is right now. And I realized it's not really how I want it to be. But that's okay, because what happened last week after our service and kind of collectively, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, acknowledging kind of the sadness and the darkness and all of the various emotions, I did come to a place of acceptance. And it wasn't that I thought, well, Wendy, how do you go from all of that to acceptance in 1 week? And what I realized was, well, it hasn't, for me, it hasn't been 1 week. I realized that this grief cycle that I've been moving through has been about the last 6 years. And so it is time, at least for me, to come into a place of acceptance. Because I'm ready to move into something new for myself, for this, hopefully this congregation, for this country, for this valley, for this world at large. And I had a session with an energy healer this week, and she said something kind of interesting. She said, chaos makes it possible to create something new because the old structures are gone. And I thought about that. Is that what is happening? That there might be a little bit of a gift in the chaos, an opening for a new level of creative energy to come in. And I hope so. And I won't say I hope so, I believe so. I believe that this is real and true, because the other option is to just live our lives hopping from one outrageous headline to another. And so we can look at all of the headlines and be outraged and feel outrage after outrage after outrage, because the headlines are outrageous. On Thursday, the Supreme Court in Wisconsin outlawed drop-off ballot boxes. In Texas, an 18-year-old girl who was 20 weeks pregnant had her water break early, and the doctors had to consult with the lawyers, who told them that because there was still a fetal heartbeat, she had to go home until her body goes into toxic shock, and then they can give her medical attention. So there are stories like this now emerging all over the country. This is the world we live in. And I get it. And last week I wore black. Today, I choose to redefine myself and I wear colors. Am I angry? Yes. Am I concerned for our nation? Absolutely. But am I just going to go quietly into that night and let fear and anger and rage control me? No, that's not who I choose to be, not in this new world. And so I'm ready to be in a new world, to lift the veil, so to speak, and consciously embrace what that means. What do I mean when I say lifting or releasing the veil? Last week, I came across a series of lectures from Caroline Myss called The Courage to Confront Evil. And I decided to listen to it last week because, you know, I was kind of in a dark place and I thought, why not confront evil while I'm in a dark place? But it turns out a lot of what she's talking about is not about evil. It's actually very hopeful. But what she does do is offer a realistic take on what it means to be in this world, in this new reality. And I actually find her perspective very empowering, inspiring, hopeful, and helpful. So she starts by helping us realize that what makes this time vulnerable is that we are living in a world where so many things that are familiar are evaporating and they're not coming back. And she says, we are living in a world where so many things that are familiar are evaporating and they are not coming back. There's going to be a lot of threads and dominoes that are falling, and long threads that will take us into the future that is yet unwritten. But that future will not include a lot of things from our past. Anything that gives the society a structure that it once had of what you thought of as linear stability, because we are headed for a vertical era, an energetic era. She continues on, and this is where we are going. We are coming into a time where we are watching the ice shift and we are beginning to see the revelation of a new era in which we are seeing the power of the soul or the heart take over the power of the mind. I want to stop on those two things. We are entering into a vertical era, not a linear era. And that takes a little bit of explaining. It will probably take more than just this sermon, but it's just something to think about. What does she mean by that? And we are seeing the power of the soul take over the power of the mind. And I don't know about all of you, but I find that kind of beautiful. We are living in a time in which our heart, we're opening, we're expanding our heart in a way that connects with other people. And letting go of some of our linear intellectual thinking that has divided us. And Lee Harris, through his channeling of a group of beings called the Z's, says it this way: you are becoming the new human soul. What we are asking you to understand is the dismantling of the systems that you see around you right now is not so much the dismantling of the systems themselves. It is the dismantling of the consciousness that birthed those systems. Dismantling the consciousness that birthed those systems. So I want us to take a moment to really think about that. What is the consciousness of the patriarchy? What is the consciousness of white supremacy? What is the consciousness that says man has dominion over the earth? The consciousness that says, let a few people get as rich as they can, and then their wealth will just trickle down to the rest of us. What is that consciousness? And what is happening, says Lee Harris, is that we are dismantling the consciousness that birthed those systems. And in addition to that, Caroline Myss says, this is why we are so vulnerable when we don't know what to believe anymore. What's true about God? What's true about the soul? The churches are not able to sustain this journey because it is their time. So we must look to understand mystical teachings that have held together since Plato, since before, since forever, since no matter where we point, they're the same teachings, and they tell us again and again, this journey is about you. It is about managing you. These traditions are dissolving because it's time for them to dissolve. But what will be sustained, she says, are the mystical teachings of each of these traditions. These will remain intact because they are universal, because they contain the truth, and because this truth contained in each of these traditions, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Sufism, they will blend together to become one tradition. And that tradition will eventually form a bio-spiritual ecology. I like that word, bio-spiritual ecology that pours into our health and takes with it the truth that our bio-spiritual ecology is governed by laws of nature, and that the true spirituality is a blending of the mystical laws of heaven that are expressed in the physical world as laws of science. I'm going to say that again. And that the true spirituality is a blending of the mystical laws of heaven that are expressed in the physical world as the laws of science. And that through these, and that these run through our soul, and that the soul knows these laws, and they are expressed through us by the power of choice. This is our co-creative power. Combining the mystical and the science and our physical and our spiritual, and understanding that it's all one. Myss says, it is time that we evolve to a global village for the sake of our survival. If we look at what is happening now, this is the first time in the history of civilization that every single expression of life is involved in this transition. From every aquatic creature to every land creature, from every government to every nation, to the environment, to the banking system, to the church, to every pillar of society. Every expression of life is involved in this transition. Nothing, no one is outside this transition. And now here's the key. And there are a lot of people who are choosing not to get on the bandwagon because there are a lot of people for who the pursuit of this consciousness is not comfortable. There is a lot to digest in these words. So much to digest. And so I invite us to just sit with these words for a time, to think about what it means in each of our own lives. And like I said earlier, I personally, this week, am coming to a place of peace and comfort with the truth of these words, because they help me understand what is going on around me. They help me make sense of this very unfamiliar and chaotic world. And they help give me the courage to find my voice in these times. Because why not find our voices now? Everything's in chaos. We can either go with the chaos, or we can get grounded and centered and find our inner self, find our truth self, find our voice, and be an expression of something else, something we want to be, something we choose to create or co-create together, that comes out of our hearts, that's something that is heart-centered, something that will sustain our souls instead of just rotting our minds. And so I'm optimistic this week, because if this is where we're headed, then I'm on board and I'm ready to take that vertical leap and see how high up we land. And so those are just some of my thoughts. I'm looking at the clock and I realize we have a little bit of extra time this morning. So I'll just let us take a few breaths, let this kind of sink in. And if anybody has any thoughts or anything that they'd like to share about what I just said, if it makes sense or if it seems totally wacky to all of you, that's okay too. That's where I'm headed. So I've enabled people on Zoom to unmute themselves if they would like to. And so if you're on Zoom and you'd like to say something, just unmute yourself and I'll invite you to speak. If you're here in the sanctuary and you have any thoughts, I open it up for your thoughts too. Monty and Elizabeth, go ahead.
I just have to say that I love the sermon, and it's that there are a lot of people that aren't comfortable with the changes in consciousness that are taking place. To me, that's the key, and and I really like the idea of a vertical jump, which is anyway. I just have to tell myself, I think, that it might take a while, this ascension, and that maybe we can't expect it to happen overnight. I mean, that that can't stop us from being a part of this ascension and using our voices and our hearts, as letting our voices speak through our hearts, or our hearts speak through our voices. But maybe it's not even going to happen in our lifetime, and and I think for me, I've come to the realization, for me, that if I expect it to happen now, that's my ego speaking anyway. That's my ego needing it, and who am I to demand? But anyway, I'm rambling on a little too much, and I really liked your sermon, and so be it.
Thank you, Monty. Betsy, go ahead.
I just wondered, Wendy, if we could take a minute to breathe into that space and do a little meditation on what you said, just to visualize what that might look like for ourselves personally. So I wanted to invite everybody, if they would, to put their hands on their heart if that feels comfortable for you today, and breathe into your heart center. And then take a second to visualize what that expanding consciousness might mean for you in your personal relationships. Maybe closing down your eyes if that's comfortable today. And just let that breath in and out. And then taking a second to breathe into the heart center and feel and visualize what that expanding consciousness might look like for our faith community. And another deep breath in, feeling your heart center and visualizing what that consciousness expanding might look like for our world, our globe. When you're ready, opening your eyes if you had them closed down. And as Monty said, so be it. Aho. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Betsy. Sandy, go ahead.
Oh, I don't even know the origin of the phrase "as above, so below." You might, Wendy, but it's repeated a lot by the Buddhist group that I'm in, that Mary Mack introduced me to, that meditates every morning, has a Dharma talk every day, which has changed me profoundly over the last couple of years. And I've just been thinking that listening it's kind of in our language now, everywhere I look, and it's kind of coming out of everywhere, to really listen to each other. And I've edited a book that's going to be coming out by Christian McEwen called In Praise of Listening, where she interviewed people all over the world, all kinds of artists and people we'd recognize and wouldn't recognize, and thinkers, scientists, on listening, and listening within, listening to others, listening to the world, listening to everything that's alive, which is pretty powerful. So I think just even that one change in itself, that I try to listen more, talk less, and that I see this as something kind of a wavelength through the world, is very encouraging to me. And thank you for the sermon.
Thank you, Sandy. And yeah, I think that's where I am, is that it kind of doesn't matter what other people do. It kind of doesn't matter what our neighbors or our friends or our family are doing or saying, because we can be different if we choose to. And with the magnet, with the kids, we can get sucked into that negativity, or we can get into our own heart space and expand it out, and then attract other people who are expanding it out in the same way that Betsy just shared with us. So if there are no other thoughts, let us end today with one of my favorite UU hymns, Love Will Guide Us.